Hey everybody, it's Jed here with Skookum Arts, and today I thought it'd be kind of interesting if I showed you our level save system in our game. So I actually did an article on this a while back, but it was like a year ago, so I thought it'd be cool to put it in video form, and some of you might find it interesting. So our save system is actually pretty much all custom. I had actually started with I was trying to decide what type of format and how everything should be structured, and I was actually probably going to go with like XML or JSON initially, and those are they're really nice formats, and they work really well. But after doing some testing and everything, I decided just to do my own thing, and it's more fun doing your own thing. It's definitely not the most time efficient, but you have a lot more control over what happens, and so that's what I decided to do. So I thought it'd be I thought I'd just kind of go through the code and just kind of talk about it. And please forgive me for my messy code. It's definitely not like the best, but it works. So this is the level class, and in the level class of our game, so actually let me just preface really quick. So our levels, let me load a level. So this is what we're trying to load and save, which is this. So all of these signs are made up of individual pieces, and I will actually I have another video talking about how the signs are kind of constructed and rendered, so you can go watch that if you haven't seen it. But basically all of the signs are these separate pieces, and they're all put together and then rendered. And that process of knowing where they are and what they do and everything is saved in the file and loaded with the save system and everything. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So this is what we're going to be loading, these individual props and their values and everything. So let's get back to the code. So it initially starts with the level file, and the level file, it has, let me actually go back to that level. So the level file is actually in the Unity scene, and this is it right here. And pretty much all this has is a name. So this is the name of the file that this level should load. And it does have some like other things that are already in here basically to override the position of the signs and everything. But other than that, that's basically all this is just a file name. So when the game loads and this level loads, this function right here, load immediate, is called. And what this does is it calls on the save system to find a particular path for the file name that it wants to load. It then checks to make sure that it's not empty or something goofy, and then it starts changing the status, or it changes the status to let everybody know that we're loading this level. This we can ignore. This is for like the save files, which this is actually something I'm working on. This is like if you're part of the way through the game and you save it and you want to reload where you were. So this isn't really finished. But this right here is basically the meat and potatoes of this whole function. What this does is it calls on our save system to load the file at this particular path, and what it does is it also gives it a function. Now this like function pointer, this delegate, is actually here in the level, and this function is responsible for creating the individual props. And so basically what we're telling the save system is to load this level, and to, when you're loading the level, use this function to create the individual props. So, and I'll talk about more about that later, like why I did that. But So let's get into the actual loading of the level, which all happens in the save system class. So if I jump over there, so the save system, I've tried to kind of pull everything out and make it very like black boxed and everything. So that's why this is so small. It actually sends data somewhere else, which we'll get into. But so all this function does is it first off grabs the file. It just reads the text. So it just yanks all the text from the file. And actually, I'll pull open that level file. Let's see here. So this file that we were loading is actually right there. It is. So this is the file we were loading, and this, I talked briefly about this in another video too, but this is basically how all of it's constructed. It has every single entity that's saved to the system has a header explaining some stuff about the entity, and then it has values for the entity, and so we'll get more into that. But back to the save system. So the save system yanks all the text, which is all of this, yanks all this, and then it sends all that data, and along with that callback to this other function. And this function, it goes through, it just checks to make sure that our data isn't empty or something goofy, and then from there it takes all that data and it splits it up. It splits it up into a whole bunch of small strings, and the way that it splits it up is with this particular character. So what it does is it goes through and it finds what does it find? Oh, okay, yeah. So we'll look at this character really quick. What is this? Okay, yeah. So this is like the little pipe symbol. So it goes through and it splits up this big wall of text into small strings separated by these pipe symbols. So what we are left with is repeating strings of the entity, like info, and the entity's properties, or like its fields. So let's go back. So now that we have all that data broken up into strings, and this is just repeating pairs of info about the entity and the entity's data. So we're going to loop through all that data, and we're going to first off going to grab the entity info about the first object, and we're going to load that into this info object. And I'll go into how we actually load this in a second. But we load the info, then we come down here and we try to figure out its type, basically. And then if we can figure out what type of object this is, then we load the data for that. So we have the type, and then we actually, this callback method, it was actually, I was showing this earlier, this is the callback method for the level. So we're actually calling the level here, and we're telling the level, hey, I need an object of this type. So if we go back, that is what, back in the level file, that's what this create prop was. That's what we're calling here. And let's go to that really quick. But all this does is it takes that info, and then based off of what type it is, it grabs an object, a game object of that type. It assigns the info to it for later use. It adds it to some stuff here in the level, and then it tells the particular entity that it's been created, and then it takes that object and returns it back to the save system. And what those objects would be, if I go over to Unity, would be a prefab. So what the level is actually loading would be one of these objects. So here is a door. So this is a prefab. its type is a door. And so if the save system were to load a door, it would grab that info, throw it over to the level system. It would grab that object, the door object. It would assign a few things, and then it would throw the door object back to the save system. So once the save system has that door object, then it can load the data into the door object. And we'll actually load up the door script here. So we take that door object, which is this right here. It's actually a type object right now, so this could be anything. This could be a key, this could be a door, this could be a jump pad, doesn't matter. And then we load all that data about the door into it. And then we just repeat the process. So this just goes through, and it goes through every single item in the save file, creating and assigning data to the objects. And then once this is done, we return back to the level, and then the level does a few things where it tells all of the individual props that they need to that they've been loaded so that they can do something. So various props do different things after they've been loaded. We set the status to loaded. We call a few things here for just telling general people that things have been loaded. And then if we were supposed to spawn, then we set this level as the active level. And by doing that, then the player will actually spawn in the level. So that's kind of the general overview. Let me go into a little more detail into the save system and how that's actually implemented. So if we go back to the save system, all of the objects were being loaded and created. So once they are loaded, and we have them here, so this is right after the level has given us the object, we can then basically shove all the data from that file into the object. So how do we actually do that? How do we know which values to put data into and how they are connected? So I'm doing that by using a library in C# called Reflections, and I'm not going to get into too much detail about reflections because it is rather complicated, but it's a way of analyzing your code while the code is running and then doing things to it. It's really pretty cool. So if you have any questions about that, definitely leave it down in the comments, but I'm going to kind of gloss over, I'm going to skip all of that. But just a very high level of what it allows you to do is in the individual object script, whatever value I want to save, all I have to do is give it this little attribute above the value I want to save, and this just tells the save system when you are saving and when you are loading this key object, save and load this grabbed value and save and load this is destroyed value with these names. So I named is destroyed ID, and I named grabbed IG. So if we actually were to go back to that level, here's the key. So this is the data for the key, and here is that ID value and IG value. So the save system knows that these two values need to be saved, and what it does is it takes the object, it takes that data, that metadata about the object, which this is the info that we got through C# Reflections, and it takes the actual data, which is literally the string ID false and IG false, and then it attempts to put all that data into the key. And so let's drill down into this function that actually does that. So now in this method we have the object, we have the info about the object, and we have the actual data for the object that we want to assign. So we first need to kind of prep the data. So we're just going to split it. We're going to take that big string and we're going to chop it up into little pieces. And those pieces are the name of the value itself, the name of the value, and the value itself. So, and that's going to split it based off of anytime there's a return in the text. So anytime it's a new line, anytime there's a new line, it'll split it. And then we're going to put that data into a dictionary, and we put it in a dictionary because it makes it easier to kind of pull the data out in an unordered way. So potentially if the values are switched in their order, so they're backwards here, so maybe grabbed is before is destroyed or something. Anyway, so we have that kind of the data changed a little bit into a dictionary. We then pass it to the actual meat and potatoes of all of this, which is this function, which actually does the assigning of the values. And so this uses the reflections portion of the code. So we have the object, we have the types, the info about the objects, and we have the data now. So we're going to loop through all of the data, and we're going to just we're going to grab the name of the field, we're going to grab the value of the field, and then we're going to attempt to get info about the field. So that's what all this that's what this type info was that we've been passing along through these functions. So we're going to try to grab the info based off of the field. So this is this would be the ID in this case. So that would be is destroyed. So we're going to grab the info about it, and we're going to put it in this variable, and then based off of that, we're going to try to convert our value into something that we can actually use, and then we're going to assign it to the object. So what we have here is we're going to attempt to try to get what's called a converter. And these are things that I've done up there that I didn't show you, but there's just a list of converters which can turn a string, so just a string of data, into a type, into an object. So that's what this line does. I'm not going to get into details about this, but it takes the string value and it turns it into a bool value. So that would turn this string of false into a bool value. And so that's where this is. So this is a bool, and then this is our entity, and we're going to use that info that we had to set the value of the is destroyed property to false. So this is rather complicated, and I probably didn't do a good job explaining it, but that's how it works. So we now have the object with all the values into it, and it just returns, and it continues on with the next object, and it keeps repeating that over and over and over again until all the objects are assigned. Another reason why I kind of made my own little save system instead of using like a format like JSON or XML is that I have the ability to basically chop up all of the execution of this loading and saving into smaller bits, so that I don't have to load or save all on one frame. So I can basically run, load, 10 objects, and then I can wait a certain period of time, or like wait a frame and then load 10 more objects, and then wait a frame, and then load 10 more objects. And so in the level, I actually have another function that instead of loading this, the function that we are looking at through all of this, actually loads the entire file and assigns all of the data to the objects in one frame. Which most of the time is probably okay because the levels aren't, if the level isn't huge, or you're like loading up the game initially, that's not a big deal. But when you're traveling around in the world, in our game and everything, I don't want a level loading to make a frame spike or something. So this function allows me to basically split up that data. Well, split up the assigning the data into multiple frames, like I was saying. So this uses a Unity coroutine, which basically halts. It allows you to halt execution of a function until a either just like a frame or a certain period of time, and then it allows you to come back and continue execution. So here, in this function, I can, for instance, read all the text from the file, and then I can wait a frame. And then I can start loading an object, and then I can, down here, if I have a little condition here that once I've loaded 10 objects, then I will wait a frame, and then it'll come back here and then load 10 more objects and then wait a frame. And so that's pretty cool because it allows me to do, stretch this execution over, whatever, 50 frames or something, which seems like a lot, 50 frames, but in reality that's like 1 second. So it'll stretch the loading of all of this over a second or something. So yeah, that's that. So I hope you enjoyed that little overview of our save system. If you have any questions, definitely don't hesitate to leave them down in the comments. And I hope I didn't ramble too much and I explained it well. But if you enjoy our game, and if you enjoy what we're doing and everything, definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you could, follow us on all of our social media, and wishlist our game on Steam. Thank you.